that Jews had only been radical since the Enlightenment, and Jewish radicalism really began in the late 18th century in Germany, after Napoleon decided to clean out the remnants of European feudalism, and that ever since the Roman period, ever since the fall of the temple in Jerusalem, Jews in Europe, where they lived mostly, had been living there at the pleasure of the Christian or the Muslim community, and they had to, they couldn't be radical, politically or culturally. They were the king's men almost. Oftentimes they did some of the dirty work for, and they couldn't even try to convert, because during a medieval period, at times they had the Talmudic scholars, the rabbis, had debates with the archbishops, and sometimes they won. And if they won, that was very bad, because I think they cut off a few Jewish heads there, or hung them, I guess, when they won.
Let's not get too far back into the Middle Ages.
Right, so they decided not to be converting, except the reforms of people. So all right, that was just prologue, because you explain in this book how the classical Jewish proletariat disappeared. It started in Europe, right? In the 19th century. And now, tell us a little about the history.
All right. When you were talking about Jewish radicalism, you have a skosh of it in Germany. Karl Marx comes out of a converted Jewish family, etc., where you begin to get a sort of mass-based Jewish radicalism is in the old Tsarist Empire towards from 1881 on, and as those Jews migrated into the United States, Britain, and France, you get a streak of Jewish radicalism. But I want to emphasize that even then, don't have any illusion that a majority of the Jews were radical.
Majority of any European.
But certainly, let's put it this way: New York City had a Jewish socialist congressman, Meyer London, from 1912 to 1920 on the Lower East Side. So yes, he won the vote. So yes, there was a tradition of Jewish radicalism. I want to point out that at that particular time, the Lower East Side had the highest population density of any place in the world. It was more densely populated than the slums of Bombay. That was at the beginning of the 20th century. We're now at the end of the 20th century, and in today's America, American Jewry is the richest ethnic or religious group in the United States, richer than the West.
All right, I want to go back to Europe just for a minute. These were cultural radicals too, but there was a Jewish proletariat, right, in Eastern Europe.
Yes.
And did that develop, say, the way, did that develop parallel with a non-Jewish proletariat? For instance, in Poland, where there were Polish textile workers too?
No, it was overwhelmingly Jewish. The textiles had been a Jewish trade in the Middle Ages, so when it became more of a technologically advanced capitalist industry, it was still overwhelmingly Jewish. Now there were Jewish railroad workers until the Polish anti-Semites drove them off the railroads and stuff like that. I mean, Jews were 10% of the population of Poland, so which was blacks in the United States at 12%. So they were in a lot of trades, but they were not in what they call the heaviest industries. In other words, steel, coal, stuff like that. Coal was and is very important in Poland. But I want to emphasize that here in the United States, the garment industry in New York, which was the center of American garments, was Jewish. Today, if you go into the garment industry and you look around, what do you see? You see Korean signs, you see Sikhs with turbans, Arabs making purses.
All right, so to give the anti-Semites a little ammunition, are the union leaders in these trades still Jewish?
Well, you've got one guy, I forget his name even anymore, who's still the head of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers. And the Skosh, also I think it might be a Jewish leader or two left. in the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, whereas at the base, of course, they're Haitians and Chinese and, you know, all kinds of people like that, Southern whites even, and so on and so forth. It's not any kind of conspiracy. These are the guys who've been running the union from time out of mind. The opposition to them is very limited and very weak, and it does not take in any way, as far as I can observe, an ethnic
okay, so while we're talking about the clothing
right.
trade, which my father was in, and he was a member of the Amalgamated, compared to other unions, do they have a strong sector? Are they a strong, you know, I know the whole union movement is weak, but are they one of the sectors?
No.
Like, no,
the answer is no. In fact, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union has what one would call an intimate relationship to the CIA, and has had it from day one of the CIA. All right, Jay Lovestone, who was one of the leaders, I think, of Local 22, as I recall. He was an ex-communist, former head of the Communist Party in the United States, and he became a follower of David Dubinsky, the head of the ILGWU. And he was part of the OSS operation during World War II, and then when the OSS re-emerged as the CIA, there was Lovestone and so on and so forth. And the reason for that was, of course, as these were old socialists, you know, Jewish socialists, and they had connections in Europe, so the CIA used them to fight
weren't there
communism
always strong communist and anarchist elements in these New York?
There were the fur workers were Stalinists well into the 50s or 60s. In the ladies' garment union, the communists were the dominant element in the early 20s, but they mismanaged the strike. They were incompetent in a strike, and that's when Dubinsky who, took over the union and ran it, and from then on in, the communists were a vocal minority. That is, they were always there, but always a minority. And then, as I say, when Lovestone broke with the Communist Party, or actually was put out of the Communist Party, came over, that sort of finished them as an effective force.
Okay, so the Jews moved into the professions mostly, right?
Yes. Let me put it this way. Remember that many Jews came to the United States as businessmen. Okay, my family made kitchen and bar equipment on the Bowery from about 1913 on, something like that.
What had they done in the old country?
My grandfather was a sheet metal worker in the old country. I don't know if he was a businessman or not, but here he became the land of opportunity. Let me put it this way. Certainly by the 1960s, 3/4 of all the stores in New York City were run by Jews. Okay, and certainly Fifth Avenue and 34th Street, which are and Fulton Street in Brooklyn, which are the three dominant streets.
So is that still happening?
No, because what's happened is that let me be very exact. Okay, at the top level, you have of the 400 richest people in the United States, about 85 are Jews, and about 22% of the multimillionaires in the United States are Jews. At the billionaire level, it's about a third of the billionaires are Jewish. However, below that, at the level of even the substantial garment factory owner, his son does not go into business at all. He becomes a professor of nuclear physics or even medieval origami or something like that.
Okay, and these rich Jews, are they Jewish identified? Are they religious?
Now,
the richest one.
All right. Now, let me explain. The organized Jewry, that is to say, the synagogues, the Zionist movement, the Jewish Museum, you know, all those kind of things, they are funded by rich Jews, of course, because the majority of Jews don't give money to Jewish organizations. Religious Jewry is quite substantially rich. It's not a poor community. There are poor Jews. I mean, there are a few, but the number of well-to-do religious Jewish businessmen is is not inconsequential, to say the very least. What is simply happening is two things, and these are two things that I think are related. Number one, their children are not going into business. Their children are going, in, as you say, into the professions. Jews are the most educated stratum in the American society. Okay? They're the most educated stratum in the world. Okay? American Jewry. As a corollary of this, they are abandoning the Jewish religion. All right? And I want to say something, and I want to say it very clearly and very distinctly, and I'll even repeat it so there's no ambiguity. We know, because the Jewish establishment does its own polls, that a majority of young Jews today marry outside of the Jewish religion, if they marry at all. I mean, a lot of people don't even get married, okay? What is left, the so-called organized Jewry, as they refer to themselves in the Jewish press and places like that, has become sociologically the dirty ring in the bathtub after the water has run down the drain. In other words, it's when you have a situation where a majority of your youth have checked out, what is left is an imploding group of increasingly fanatical people. All right? So when you're talking about organized Jewry now, I'll give you an example of something. The Forward, the Jewish newspaper, endorsed David Dinkins. They didn't like Dinkins. They ran article after article for one end of the year to the other against Dinkins, but the fact is that they're tied to the labor movement, to the A. Chaikin, I think is the name of the guy from the Amalgamated Clothing Workers, etc., and they endorsed Dinkins. The next week, after they endorsed Dinkins, they had an editorial in which they announced, the Forward announced to its readers that people kept calling them up and talking to the switchboard operator, you know, the woman at the switchboard, denouncing her as a nigger lover. Denouncing her. I mean, in other words,
she was black.
I don't know. They didn't know. I presume she was white. I presume she was Jewish. But the point is, you know, I mean, they called in to tell the Forward there's nothing but a bunch of nigger lovers, okay? Now, so that's what's now, and they said Jesus, you know, excuse me, they didn't say Jesus, but I said Jesus. But wait. But what I'm getting at is they said, gee, we'd like to think that these weren't Jews who called us, but, you know, obviously, who calls a Jewish newspaper to denounce them for endorsing a black? And the reality is, that's a common thing now out in Borough Park and all them places. I've been on Bob Grant's show, if you please, all right? And the people that call in, I mean, I've gotten death threats on the radio. You know, guys calling in. I mean, now you know that guys who calling in on the radio to threaten you ain't going to do it, and that's just mouth, okay? But that's the kind of loons that are out there, and you've got every variety of Lubavitcher, who thinks that, you know, Menachem Schneerson is the Messiah. He's a modest man. He does not call himself the Messiah. He personally is a modest man about these things, but his followers, I mean, they'll tell it like it is. I mean, if that man ain't the Messiah, ain't no Messiah, you know?
Well, that's another sign of how wonderful things are when we have messianic
that's
cults.
I mean, but what do you think is going to happen to that movement when Schneerson dies? This guy's 91 years old. Because there's a history of...
I'll tell you something. That's a toughie. What is going to happen to that movement? They'll probably go on. They'll probably just go on. You know, they'll have a war over succession.
Thing where there's a reincarnation. Right?
Well, look.
So they get over this Messiah.
Well, there have been hundreds of these dates set, you know, when the world is going to end, and generally
they just had one in Kiev, by the way, and it didn't happen last weekend.
The world didn't end.
Well, one thing we know is the world will end someday. I mean, that's it. And they'll get the last laugh on us.
Generally, there's a collapse, of course, and a falling off after the grand event doesn't happen. But I think these Jews, like you say, they're so well organized and there's so much invested in it that with some minor falling off, maybe there are some of the Lubavitchers who don't support the Messiah.
Well, but very few.
And there's struggle. There's
Very
dynastic struggle regularly.
But I want to. Let's get off the craziest of the crazy. Let's talk about the more sane and rational.
Yeah, and their politics.
Yeah, let's talk about the more sane and rational. My observation is that, of course, when young Jews leave the fold, they don't all go in one direction. There's no motion on the part of the Jewish population to the left. On the contrary, because of their economic status, all the thrust is to the right.
All right, well, but is there less of a thrust to the right than the general population?
Look, let me put it this way.
You know,
Let me put it this way. In this last election in New York City, only 32% of the Jews voted for David Dinkins, okay? Now, you're talking about the Jews voted something like 85% for Clinton, all right? Now, the difference, maybe in the eye of God, there's a difference between Dinkins and Clinton, I mean, politically, okay? In reality, those people, that 85% that turned into 32%, did not vote for David Dinkins because David Dinkins is black. Not because he's a Democrat, well, not because he's incompetent.
Well, I don't know. I ended up voting for him, but I didn't want to vote for him, and
But I'm talking about the people who didn't vote for him, all right? Why did they vote for him? Because they're concerned about that he was a crook?
Well, you didn't vote for him because he didn't live up to any of his liberal left agenda that he supposedly had.
But the people who didn't vote for him, the vast bulk of the Jews who did not vote for him, voted for Giuliani, okay? No, that's number one. And in the last election for senator in New York, a higher percentage of blacks voted for the Democrat who was Jewish. What was his? Excuse me?
So you don't even remember his name, Abrams.
Abrams, there you go. Then,
Yeah.
all right,
That's how memorable
a higher
he is.
percentage, memorable man, famous for his wit, yes.
Right.
A higher percentage of blacks voted for the Jewish candidate Abrams than Jews. 41% of the Jews voted for D'Amato. Now, when you vote for D'Amato, okay, you're a right-winger. I mean, I have no illusions. I mean, D'Amato says right on the T-shirt, right wing, okay? And you are a right-winger when you vote for D'Amato, okay? But in general, where Jews are more liberal than the general population as a whole is on a question like abortion, all right? They're overwhelmingly for it, etc. But I find the polls show that Jews are now for restrictions on immigration. Now, when you realize the Jews are the great immigrators of all time, and walked across borders,
Everyone is for that.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm for open borders.
But you're Jewish. Or look, I don't want to. You know, I seem to be ending up defending a group called the Jews, which I scarcely believe exists only in a metaphysical.
That's right. They're checking out with the youth checking out.
This whole question of race and gender and ethnicity. You know, I'm the last of the red-hot, rootless cosmopolitans. You know, you can just because you're born into a culture or a nation or a gender, I mean, you have some choices. So I don't want to end up. So we're just trying to get the facts here. I don't really care that much if. For instance, if I want the country to turn leftward, and if the Jews aren't there, you know, it's not going to be the greatest tragedy.
That's exactly the point. Look, let's put it this way: the Jews are assimilating in the United States into the middle and upper class, not into the lower class. They're not moving to the left, and so what? No one demands, or if someone is, let me just finish.
There are Jews. You and I are Jews.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Look. No one expects the bulk of Irish in the United States to suddenly all of a sudden go to the left, okay? There are individual Irish guys and women who go to the left, okay? And that's good, and that's all that can be expected, all right? Any notion that the Jews, because of their past radicalism or of their past poverty or their past persecution are going to be part of the left is one, in defiance of existing sociological tendencies among the Jews, and is writing in the ashes of history. It's a fairy tale. It makes people feel good. Look, someone like Jim Sleeper, okay, gets up after the last election and says, when 35% of the Jews voted for Dinkins and 65% voted for Giuliani and said, but that 35% is better than the Irish percentage who voted for Dinkins or the Italian percentage, so Jews are still more progressive than the rest of the whites. So they're not perfect, but hey, better than the rest. But the reality, that doesn't change the reality. 65% voted for Giuliani.
So is it
I mean, it's a fantasy. You know, in other words, everything it comes out at the end of the day that the so-called liberal Jew who votes for Dinkins is better than everybody else. God, he's the most wonderful fellow on the planet.
There's also
but is this a question of economics as an ethnic group gets more and more into the economic mainstream? They become more conservative to protect the property they've acquired and all this stuff.
Certainly. I mean, it is a fairy tale, as I say, to think. Yeah. I mean, look, Adolf Hitler is dead since 1945. He was in another country, on another continent. You know, I mean, to think that that kind of persecution, or the persecution of the Tsarist Empire, or stuff like that, which is, and that's from the Persians and the Medes. I mean, you know, in other words, every generation is the now generation.
There's also an attempt, and it's not just the Jews who do this, to establish a mythology, for instance, out of the Bible. You can read the Bible, and if you just read some of the prophets, well, the Jews are the most radical people in the world. If you read some of the other nasty things that they did, for instance, they committed some of the first genocides in the world. And if you have 10 million people, I don't care who they are, Jews, Catholics, whatever sect, or even whatever political party, you're going to find good and bad in every, and these mythologies get constructed, and they can be flattering to the people who.
If I got a minute,
like the Jews a Jew will say, well, we in quotes had Einstein, Freud, Marx, and Jesus. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I look at him and I say, yeah, but you're not Freud, Marx, Einstein, or Jesus, are you?
I have very great difficulty doing, I cannot do a single dot of algebra. I mean, Einstein just went zip right past me. But I want to dump on another category of Jews for a minute. I'm talking about people like the editors of the Village Voice and The Nation, all right? The secular Jewish liberals, okay?
The editor is a Gentile and a time descendant of the time.
No, the editor, but I mean people like Richard Goldstein, who I had a little debate with, and Victor Navarsky over at The Nation and so on. And you know, if you pick up the Village Voice, every article, the first article begins with, as a Jewish gay, and then the next article is a gay Jew. You know, and I mean, those are the two dominant themes in that paper. I mean, once in a while, a wasp is allowed to wander through, or a black, but I mean, those are the gay Jews and Jewish gays, okay? The fact of the matter is, they go, to use the Bible, the prophets that you were talking about, they go for the Democratic Party, and I'm talking about Cuomo, they support Cuomo, Clinton, Dinkins. As a dog returneth to his own vomit, so a fool returneth to his folly.
All right, but give them an alternative.
Wait a minute, wait. What has simply happened is that old-fashioned liberalism, Jewish and Gentile alike, okay, has become the official or unofficial ideology of the establishment. Cuomo, Dinkins, and Clinton are the establishment.
Okay,
so... And what they do is they are supporting the establishment, always with a little bit of left rhetoric. Is nothing sacred, Brother Brenner? I mean, do you want to disrupt the black-gay alliance? Is nothing sacred, Brother Brenner? Abortion.
Right here you have 100% majority with you. Now, what are we going to do about this?
Well, it is time for us serious people to get serious and to set up our own party and to run candidates in the congressional elections and the gubernatorial elections in '94. Some of the blacks are now beginning to talk. Mutter is more the accurate term about setting up a new party. There was a big forum up at the Patrice Lumumba Coalition up in Harlem.
You were there?
I wasn't there, but I just talked to Lambe Braff from the coalition, etc.
So
And I have spoken there several times. Is it going to happen? I don't know. That there's ferment and discussion, that is for real. I mean, that is definitely happening. But whether, look, my observation is that when people vote for the Democratic Party, I take all of their progressive talk cum grano saltus, as us Latin scholars put it, okay? Whether they be black, white, blue, or green, you vote for the Democratic Party, you vote for the party of the rich, the party of demagoguery, of ethnic pandering, et cetera, and then you say, but after this election, I'm going to get serious and get ready for the next election. I am always a little bit skeptical about the bona fides of people who talk left and vote right, okay? In fact, I would say about the Voice and the Nation, et cetera, that they have shifted from being the right wing of the left to the left wing of the right. And I think that that is true of American liberalism in general, that it's, if it ever had a progressive face, it's really over.
Well, to state a real truism, you can't wait until 2 days before the election to decide that you should have had a party.
That's right.
You got to do it right after the election, right after the previous.
Right now, yesterday. You got to start yesterday. And I'm somewhat skeptical, but you know, maybe something will happen. But one thing is very clear, especially in New York City, all right, which is that given the fact that the majority of the population of the city is black, Hispanic, and Oriental,
there's a good
that
chance.
That is a good chance. There's no better than any before, because as I say, I don't see the black activist milieu as any brighter than the white activist milieu in any way.
I mean, there's
okay?
a possibility
but
here.
If they are beginning to talk about a new party, then let's put it this way: if such a party does not have a black base, then it doesn't fly. Okay, in other words, Victor Navarsky and Richard Goldstein are not talking about a new party, but even if they did, so what? They have no appeal to the oppressed that would be the base for such a party.
Okay, so we're going to be back in the near future talking about Israel, or is it Ireland? Iresreal. Iresreal. Thanks, Lenny.
All righty.
We'll see you again. And to all you folks out there, vote early and vote often.
Remember that. And take bribes. Definitely take bribes, like everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, don't be left out.
Is this book in print?
No, but they can get it from Carroll Communications, which is, they can look it up in books in print.
In a phone book?
They're in books in
Carroll
print.
Communications?
In books in print. If you're a literate person, you know where books in print is in the library. You can look it up and send away for it. Make me rich and famous.